when you're running away from stress, when you're running away from feeling anxious by turning to your phone and distracting yourself, like you're just making those problems worse. That's inevitably going to add more stress, more anxiousness. And now you've conditioned yourself to run away from it by turning to your phone. And I mean, it literally got to the point where it was how I fell asleep every night. I would watch YouTube until I passed out, and it was cutting into my sleep schedule, and I just kind of spiraled into an addictive relationship to my phone that just derailed those first couple years of college. I mean, derailed's a strong word. Like I still passed. I did okay. I still had fun. Like I had a great time at Berkeley, but I look back on those first few years of college specifically knowing that I did not get everything out of it that I could have in a lot of different ways. I wasted so much time. I didn't learn nearly as much as I could have, which is a shame given the opportunity I had in front of me. And yeah, I really look back and I regret it because I was just so dependent on my phone.
All right, guys, I've got Dino Ambrosi here today, and the main focus is going to be screens, the challenges that they can create in our lives. Dino has a personal story which brought him to doing this particular work where he is educating individuals. And I don't want to say too much more on that because I want Dino to answer that question of what he's up to with Project Reboot, which is a guided digital detox program designed to help teens reset their tech habits. The second I read that, I was like, I must talk with Dino. I have a 14-year-old, and the topic of screens is constant in our home. And part of the reason that it's constant is that I want my son to have access to the beneficial parts of having a phone, even just having his email and managing a calendar and learning how to navigate a device, the benefits of it. The challenges I've yet to figure out, the addictions, my own addictions. Like there's so much around this, and I've got a lot of questions. It's going to be a lot of fun today. But a little more about Dino. He was studying at UC Berkeley, and he created a semester-length course that helped over 100 of his peers reduce their screen time by an average of 3.5 hours per day. So he graduated with a bachelor's in data science, embarked on a mission to spread the contents of his course to a broader audience, hence why we're talking today. So now he's speaking, consulting, and he is facilitating this Project Reboot, which has currently helped 4,000 teens build a healthier relationship with technology. Dino, I'm thrilled to have you, man. I'm pumped for this conversation, and we're gonna get you for a Q&A within our private area of the membership for Front Row Dads as well, which I'm excited about. So thanks for being here, man.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
You know, you and I were talking before we hit record about starting with your childhood, just to give a little background of who you are and what it was like growing up. Dino, you had a pretty good childhood, man, which is inspiring to hear. And I'd love for you to just unpack that in a few minutes in your own words about why was it so good, man? You had nothing but good things to say about growing up Dino, man.
Yeah, man, I was blessed. I had a really awesome childhood. I'm from Half Moon Bay, California, which is actually where I'm at right now. I live in San Francisco now, but I'm back here hanging with family. Just got back from a month and a half of travel, so it's good to be back home. But yeah, growing up here was awesome. I'm an only child, so and that's a little unique, I suppose. So a lot of time with my parents. We did a lot of fun stuff. They really gave me a lot of free reign to find my passions and pursue them. So they pushed me to get into skiing. I was actually a little hesitant to do that as a young kid, but I started at 3. We started going up to Lake Tahoe every weekend when I was about 8. And then I caught the bug and started competing in mogul skiing and pursued that really hard all the way until high school was over. Even convinced my parents to move to Lake Tahoe so that I could ski full time for a little while in high school. So they were super supportive. I mean, Half Moon Bay is a great community. I grew up with a lot of great friends. I went to a private or independent kindergarten through 8th grade school that was pretty small. And I was definitely a quirky kid with a lot of quirky friends. So like the adapting into high school was a little tough, as an only child
Quirky
in the
how? Like, what do you mean? Like, how would
um
now looking back at as a man on your childhood, what is quirky?
man, I went through some weird phases. I had like, have you ever seen Ned's Declassified School Survival Guide? It was a
No.
TV show that was super popular when I was a kid. There's a character called Coconut Head, and he had this big bowl cut, and I had hair just like that. It was super long. I looked like a chanterelle mushroom. you know, I had like glasses and braces, and um, like there was a while where during recess in like third grade, I would just like go into the hall and like write like stories and knit while my friends were like out playing kickball on the playground. So yeah, I was like, I went through some weird phases, had some like I've always been the kind of person that like I get very fixated on things when I develop an interest. So whether that's skiing or running or golf or anything like that, I just jump headfirst into it. And I guess that also extends to writing fiction and knitting in third grade. So
Very cool.
yeah, I
My
was
son Ocean actually really loves knitting. He also
really
it's so fascinating. He's such an interesting character because he's fully obsessed with the army, wears camouflage every day, and has for years. He would love nothing more than to set up an army battle, play with the guns, but he also loves knitting, like just loves it. He went to a Waldorf school. They did knitting there. It was really cool.
that's
Did
awesome.
your did your hyper focus, if you will, or your attention to something when you fell in love with it? Did you get exposed to screens early on? Did you ever have that moment where you were addicted and played some video game until your fingers bled? Was that part of your childhood?
I mean, I think I went through phases of yeah, like getting pretty into like iPhone games. There's actually a game called Thumb Drift that I got really into in high school, and I was traveling for skiing, and we were on like a 14-hour car drive to go to the national championships for mogul skiing in Colorado. And at the time, I was in my first relationship. This is like junior year of high school, and I was doing long distance with my girlfriend who was in Half Moon Bay, and I was trying to come up with a creative way to do my promposal to her. And she played this game too, so I decided to change my username to Kylie dot 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 prom question mark, and then I set the world record in the game and told her to check the leaderboard. So I guess that
Stop! Come on, man.
yeah,
That's
I'm dead
great.
serious.
That's
Uh,
great.
so yeah, I guess like that does extend to screens, but I think my relationship with my phone was actually pretty healthy throughout all of my childhood. Especially, I mean, in high school, like, yeah, I would use it to like watch a little bit of YouTube and play some games, but it always felt like a tool that augmented my life. It didn't really feel like it infringed upon it. I did really well in school, in high school. Did well in skiing, like had extracurriculars, like I had my stuff in order, and it was just kind of like supplementary, it didn't feel
So it
like it
feels
was a
like you would
bad
have
thing.
had to have spent a crazy amount of time on your device to set a world record. I mean, I hear you. Like you might have been a genius and like crushing it in school and getting straight A's. But were you also spending 8 hours on this game, or were you just like a
No,
prodigy and killing it?
I don't want to like toot my own horn too much here, but I was just like really good at this game.
It
like
it was
I
made for
yeah,
you.
it just came to me, and
Interesting.
and yeah, I guess on that car drive, I mean, I grinded it for like 8 hours in a row on that car drive, and
That's
ended up
funny, man.
getting the world record. But yeah, that's a funny anecdote.
Dude, last question, and I want to move into Project Reboot because I don't want to travel down this rabbit hole too far, but I wanted people to know you and know your heart, know who you were, where you came from. But let's talk real quick about your dad. Like
Hmm.
you actually, when I was prepping you for this conversation, I was like, let's talk about your dad. And then I said, yeah, is there anything you want to talk about that was challenging? Like your dad ever like come to you and like, I really screwed this. What's really funny is you were like, he's a really awesome dad. I don't know if I have anything really to say. And I just think that's awesome, man. It's refreshing to hear that. I also don't think he's perfect. Probably he would not say he's perfect.
Yeah.
I'm sure if we got a therapist involved, we'd find something if we dug deep enough. But the spirit of the fact that you were like, my dad's awesome. Spent a lot of time together. It's really great, man. Tell us, What did he do that was great? What do you appreciate now as a man looking back on your childhood? You're like, dude, that was awesome. My dad was great in this area.
Yeah, I think I just sum it up with like unwavering support.
Mm.
He made a lot of time. I mean, it was helpful that my parents worked from home, and also I'm an only child, so like I got to spend a ton of time with both of them. Um, it was, I think, a combination of like he encouraged me to dive deep on the things I was into without ever getting like too. He didn't apply too much pressure, I would say, and then he was also like very open and transparent and like I mean we started conversations around the things that are difficult to talk to kids about in terms of like alcohol and
Sex,
drugs and
drugs, and rock and roll.
sex and all that
Yeah.
stuff. Like he like started talking to me about that stuff pretty early and never was like I don't know. He was always just like ensured that I would be comfortable talking to him about any of that. And I as a result like I didn't really hide anything from him as I was a kid growing up and starting to explore the things that a like late high schooler and college student does. Like I had a very close relationship with him. I felt like I could tell him anything. Um, I think like I don't know. There's pros and cons to that approach, right? Like especially with my relationship with my phone, like well, I'm sure we'll get into this. Like it got unhealthy when I was in college, and I think there were some things that could have been done proactively in high school. But at the same time, like how could he really have known? Like I don't think there's ever been a bigger generation gap between kids and parents. Like he didn't have social media when he grew up. Like it's such a new thing. Like I think it was a really hard thing to navigate, and I think his approach with with everything was basically to just give me as much like context as he could, like get his point of view across, like highlight his concerns, and then give me kind of free reign to like more or less set my own intentions for how I wanted to engage with it, and always just like maintain like open communication, if that makes sense.
Following this timeline, tell us about the problems in college. Like what sparked this project Reboot, this focus of yours to help people?
Yeah. So the transition into college was just way harder than I anticipated. I had, as I was saying, like a very good childhood, both in terms of feeling supported and having lots of hobbies and passions and stuff. I also just like, I went to schools that were not that challenging. I went to public schools where I'd never really felt like I got pushed that hard academically. And I think as a result, I kind of went in a little overconfident. And I'd also never had to manage my time before. So in high school, it was like go to school, go from class to class to class, have skiing, extracurriculars, do homework. Like it was super simple to like do well. And then I went to UC Berkeley and I started as an engineering student there, and school just slapped me in the face, right? Not only are the academics way
How?
harder,
Like how specifically?
I think a combination of things like unprecedented academic rigor, like especially those first couple of years in the engineering school. They're weeder classes. Like they want you to switch out of engineering because only a certain percentage of students like pass the classes. They're very, very challenging. And on top of that, like you have to manage your time. You have a few classes each day, and then it's on you to determine how you're going to spend the rest of that time. And at the same time, like it's my first time living with other people. I'm a very social person. There was a lot of social stuff happening, and I'd say that I did not do a great job of balancing like all the fun that I was having those first few weeks of college with giving school the time and attention that it really deserved. And a few weeks into my first semester of college, I had my first midterm in a math class and I got a 20%. So that was like a, oh man, like wake up call, because I'd never failed a test in my life going into college. And it was the first time that I was really hit with like a massive amount of academic stress.
So
So
you
I
were a social person. You were hit with the academic stress. When did the phone come into play? When did you start just turning your attention to digital distractions?
so yeah, like with that academic stress came a whole set of just like uncomfortable emotions. And this happened like almost completely subconsciously, but my default way of handling that discomfort was just to take the shortest path to distraction, and that was pulling out my phone. So it got to the point where I'd get stuck on a difficult math problem, and next thing I know, I've been scrolling through Instagram for 10 to 15 minutes, or I'd start to think about how far behind I was in school, and I just like pull out my phone and go to YouTube and run away from that. And it's a really bad habit because it's self-reinforcing, right? Like when you're running away from stress, when you're running away from feeling anxious, by turning to your phone and distracting yourself, like you're just making those problems worse. That's inevitably going to add more stress, more anxiousness, and now you've conditioned yourself to run away from it by turning to your phone. Um, and I mean, it literally got to the point where it was how I fell asleep every night. I would watch YouTube until I passed out, and it was cutting into my sleep schedule, which obviously is super bad for school. It made me way less attentive. It made me more likely to use my phone the next day. And I just kind of spiraled into an addictive relationship to my phone that just derailed those first couple years of college. I mean, derailed's a strong word. Like I still passed, like I did okay. I still had fun. Like I had a great time at Berkeley, but I look back on those first few years of college specifically knowing that I did not get everything out of it that I could have in a lot of different
Mm.
ways. I wasted so much time. I didn't learn nearly as much as I could have, which is a shame given the opportunity I had in front of me. And yeah, I really look back and I regret it because um, I was just so dependent on my phone, and that was my means of coping with discomfort.
Let's bookend this a little bit so we know where the problem began. Talk to us present day. What are you attempting to do? What problem do you want to solve? How do you want to help people? Talk to the guys that are listening about the solution you have created and a little bit about the current program. And then let's go back and fill it in, like how you built it, how you got to where you are right
For sure.
now. Yeah, but what is it? What is Project Reboot?
Yeah, so Project Reboot is at its core, it's a week-long guided digital detox program designed to help students reset their relationship with technology and build healthier tech habits. So really the goal is to help people set and adhere to informed intentions for their use of technology, specifically social media. And it's usually run in schools. I also do some consulting and have experimented a little bit with an online course, which I'm hoping to grow over the course of the next year. But basically, it's a school assembly and then some follow up activities in the classroom and a parent presentation. And then I've got some additional kind of supplementary pieces. There's an app that I've partnered with that helps students be held accountable to the intentions that they set during the program. And yeah, the goal is not just like get kids off social media or reduce their screen time as much as possible. It's really just to help them identify on their own what their ideal relationship with these apps is, and then give them the resources to follow through on that and actually make it a reality.
Yeah, that's huge, man. That's the conversation I'm having with Tiger right now is what do you want to do in your life? Like, what do you want your days to be like? What type of person do you want to be like? And then what activities help you get there? A lot of times I'll pop in and say, hey man, how are you doing today? Like, can you do me a favor and notice how you're feeling? Notice how you're breathing. Notice what's happening in your body. Notice what's happening with the clock. And then just like, let's talk about it. Because I tell them, I go, sometimes, man, I could come in and like bulldoze you, and I could seriously put restrictions on. But I want you to learn about these things, and then us to talk about them,
For sure.
where you can learn how to be aware. The biggest thing is awareness. Like
Absolutely.
food, we used to say, like, how do you feel after eating that? Do you feel more energy, less energy? How do you feel an hour later? How do you, these were a lot of questions. And Tiger, now he really he's dialed into his body. Even my 8-year-old's pretty dialed in. When we talk about sugar, he's like, oh, I definitely think I feel the sugar that I ate a little while ago, because we talk about it all the time. And I notice it in myself. Like, I'll be on social media and I'm holding my breath, which is
Yeah.
wild.
Yeah.
It's wild.
That's
And the other
super
thing,
wild.
man,
Yeah.
is what I look at, dude, it's so funny, man. I know we're talking about like, well, we're talking about humans having an addiction to something. I'll wake up in the morning and I'll look at my phone to check my Aura ring for my sleep. And then maybe like there's other things that seem productive to look at, like the calendar. But dude, very quickly, I'll pop open social media, because what I'll say is, I wonder if there's any messages I need to reply to. That's how I start. And then next thing you know, like 30 minutes will go by and I'm like,
Yeah.
what just happened? Dude, do you know the guys that made the product Aro? Have you talked to them yet?
No, I haven't heard of that.
Dude, you got to know about these guys. I mean, it's not exactly what you're doing, but just somebody who's in this space, you'd be fascinated. These two dudes, really great guys. I mean, they've been here in Austin, sat in my sauna. We've talked, and they created this box that you put your phone in. The whole family can do
Oh,
it.
yeah.
And it tracks the usage of like how long it's in the box, and you can compete with people and things like that. It's
I
pretty
love
cool.
that. That's super cool.
So I'll put the phone in the box occasionally, and that'll help me. But I have to do this myself, man. I can't even imagine what it's like for a teenager to have access to all these things. And dude, when I was young, like, if you wanted to look at a pretty girl, you had to like find
Yeah.
a magazine somewhere, and it was very, the delivery mechanism was so slow. And now you have access to the whole world at your fingertips
Yeah.
in high resolution. It's crazy to me. Like, I can't even fathom growing up in this time. So let's go then to maybe like talk to us a little bit about, where do I want to go here? Where do I want to go? How about this? Let me go in a different direction than what I said. This is what every dad is wanting to know right now. Dino, what should I do? That's what the dads are wondering. What should I do? What conversation should I have with my kid? What restrictions should I put in place? Should I have some monitoring on their devices? Like, do you have any suggestions? And maybe we can even take categorically, like we could look at like a college student, or a high school student. Maybe start there, or even junior high. That's probably where it begins, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it varies. It's really, I think
Is that where your assemblies are, by the way? Are they junior high, high school? Where are they?
junior high and high school. Yeah. So
Go
sixth
to
grade
junior
to
high.
12th
Let's
grade.
just focus on that age group. What can we learn about that age group?
Yeah, for sure. So I think it might be helpful to frame this with like, what is the end point that you should work towards, regardless of the age of your kid or how long you've had a phone or whatever. I think there are really like two main variables that you need to look out for in terms of how your kid uses technology. There's awareness and there's intentionality. So awareness means having that understanding of the costs and the benefits and the consequences of using tech, in particular social media, right? And then intentionality is having the ability to follow through on what you perceive as a healthy and productive relationship with your phone and technology more generally, right? So almost everybody, when they first get on technology, they are intentional, but they're unaware, right? Your kids are probably asking you to get a phone to get on Instagram with a very specific purpose. They have an intention for using it. Their friends are using it. It's a means of communicating. There's accounts that they want to follow to pursue their passions and keep up to date on what's going on in the world. Like, they've got these clear reasons for using it, but they're also not fully aware of the negative potential of like what they're holding in their hand, right? They don't necessarily understand that when you're switching your attention between a different piece of content every 15 seconds, you're training yourself to be distracted, right?
Yeah.
Like, they don't get that yet. They don't really understand potentially the mental health impacts of constantly doing social comparison for hours and hours a day. So most people, when they first get on technology, they are intentional but unaware. And what typically happens is because of the way that these apps are designed and because they're literally battling each other to capture as much of your attention as possible, and they've figured out ways to effectively like hack humans to get them to spend more time on the apps, just like you're talking about. You go on it to check messages and it's been 30 minutes. Like that's all by design, right? The more time you look at it, the more money they make off of you. So they're doing that with a purpose. And everybody's susceptible to the design decisions that social media companies have made in pursuit of that goal. So what happens is people go from intentional to unintentional or even addicted. And it largely has to do with what I'm talking about in terms of like your phone becomes your coping mechanism for stress and discomfort. And typically what happens once people are in that corner is they're unintentional and they're still relatively unaware of the potential consequences. They have kind of a wake up point where they're like, oh man, like they usually it's seeing their screen time report. They're like, dang, like 6 hours a day. That's crazy. I think I might have a bit of a problem with my phone. And then they try to get their screen time down and it stays at the same point. And they realize they've become addicted. And then they start to learn about like, oh, this is, cutting into my sleep. This is bad for my mental health. This is, bad for my attention, all this stuff. But because their screens are their coping mechanism for discomfort, all of those realizations just lead to more discomfort that they're going to run away from by turning to their screen. So this is counterintuitive, but when I realized that I'd become addicted to my phone, it made the addiction worse. Right? Because it stressed me out. And I ran away from that stress by turning to my phone more. So usually then people move up to they're aware of the consequences. They're aware of the fact that they're addicted, but they're still unintentional. And I think this is kind of the biggest challenge that parents have with their kids is often they don't realize that their kids are aware of the fact that they have a problem with their phone because the kids deny it, because they're ashamed of it, because they blame themselves for it, right? Like it's when I was addicted to Instagram and YouTube, like I've totally thought that was just a result of my personal shortcomings. I didn't really understand the neuroscience behind how that had happened, right? I didn't get that I was being hacked. I didn't understand how big this problem was. I didn't know the average 18-year-old is spending 8 hours, 39 minutes a day staring at a screen non-productively, right? And so if anybody brought it up to me, I would deny it. I didn't talk about it with anybody. And from an outside perspective, it probably looked like I was addicted, but I was also unaware of the fact that I was addicted. And from a parent's...
Hey, dude, real quick, Dino.
Yeah.
In your TED Talk, you start by talking about how many months you have in your entire life if you live to 90. And dude, if I remember correctly, you said something to the effect of when you take away, look, this many hours for sleep, this many hours, personal hygiene, whatever it was, right?
Yeah.
Eating food. You said something to the effect of 93% of their time awake in the additional hours outside of like doing life, they will have spent on their phone.
That's what they're currently on pace for. Yeah. So that's
wow.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I'm
and you just said, just to repeat this because this is big, you said that the average who was spending 8 hours a day on their phone?
The average 13 to 18-year-old in the United States as of 2021, according to Common Sense Media, they're spending 8 hours, 39 minutes per day staring at a screen non-productively. So this doesn't count.
This is not school.
Not school.
This isn't Khan Academy. This isn't like writing a paper.
It's social media, Netflix, TikTok, video games.
Stop!
And I'm telling you, I taught a class at UC Berkeley. I've worked with UC Berkeley students that are spending 15 hours a day on their phones. I'm not joking.
Non-productively?
Non-productively.
What would that include?
Like TikTok, Twitch, Discord, it's a wide variety of things. And I've kind of started to notice like different profiles in tech addicts. There are the kids that like, it's video games, and then it's like streaming, and then it's social media. Those are kind of like the three big buckets that kids fall into. but yeah, I mean, I don't think like people know this is a problem. I knew it was a problem. I for a long time didn't really have my head wrapped around just how ubiquitous this problem is. Like my
Dude,
average,
how big of a problem? Dude, how big of a problem? Like, what is the fate of humanity if we don't figure this out?
it scares me to even think about it. It really does. Granted, I'm optimistic because I've seen that it is a fixable problem. Like I've seen a lot of students cut their screen time from 7.5 hours per day down to an hour and a half. Like if you create the
What did
right,
they do? What was the formula there?
so the formula in the course at Berkeley was one, like put everybody in this social environment of other people that are trying to build healthier relationships with tech, where it's very transparent. You have open discussions about your current tech habits. There's no judgment whatsoever, but we're going to hold each other accountable, right? That really is a huge key. And then on top of that, we kick off the course by doing a digital detox. So that was something I tested the first semester, not really knowing how effective it would be or if people would actually do it. But a significant percentage of the students were actually craving that. And it's something where people will delete Instagram for a couple days and re-download it, but it's a lot harder to do when you're not like in a group of other people that are doing the same thing, right? So the formula is basically take a step away from social media, go through a series of exercises to really define what your ideal relationship with it is. So this is the setting informed intentions piece. And that really boils down to like, understand that social media is something you pay for with your time, right? It's not free. It doesn't charge you money, but it's making money off of you. And it's a function of how much time you spend. So it really is just about like figuring out what value it adds to your life and then making a determination about how much of your time that's worth. And I think people generally undervalue their time. So you need to put in perspective, like these are all the months you have left, like this many are going to go to sleep and work and all this stuff. This is your finite resource to make the most out of life, right? So coming up with that intention is important. And then from there, it's I guess like two categories of work in order to actually adhere to that new intention that you have for how you want to use tech. It's external changes, which is basically adjusting your environment. So the number one like easy win environment change that you can make is move your phone charger away from your bed. I think like one of the worst habits that you can have or that your kids can have is falling asleep by looking at your phone. And that's something I did for years. And it's so negative because it cuts into your sleep and it makes you more likely to use your phone the next day as well. So that's a big one. Move the phone charger away from your bed. Ideally, move your phone out of the bedroom entirely so that your bed is just a completely, phone-free space. And then there's a lot of changes you can make to how your devices are set up to make them less addicting and less distracting. So going through notifications, adding barriers to getting onto social media, having some peer accountability by sharing the screenshots of your screen time report with friends. That's all super helpful. And then lastly, like there's a set of more internal changes that you need to start making too, right? To become the kind of person that has a healthy relationship with your phone, you've got to develop a certain set of traits that are built through habits. So that's mindfulness, taking time to meditate or completely unplug and go on a walk alone with your thoughts. That's going to have a massive benefit. It's resilience, being able to cope with discomfort and not feel like you need to run away from it by turning to your phone. It's productivity, being able to actually work effectively and manage your time so that you don't have this overbearing amount of academic or work-related stress that you're tempted to run away from by turning to your phone. All of that stuff, I mean, it's outside of the realm of actually what you're doing on your device, but it's going to impact it massively. So I know that's kind of a lot, but that
That's
was
cool.
that was the focal point of the course. Yeah.
It's interesting. I love this digital detox. I yesterday morning said to my son Tiger, who again is 14, and I said, "Hey, starting immediately, we're just not going to do any screens before noon. So like your devices are going to be, and talk about shifting your environment. We have this like metal suitcase decoration thing in the foyer of our house, and I'm like, all the devices are going to go in there because I don't even want you to see it. Like
Yeah,
even if some device is out and you see it, it's such a trigger to want to pick it up
for
and
sure.
play with it. So I'm like, we're going to put them in there, and I don't want them to be touched for anything before noon. And then I caught myself, by the way. I was like, except maybe if you want to do like Duolingo. And this is the thing, man. This is
Yep.
what gets it. It's like, this is the constant debate. One positive thing leads you into something negative. And it brings up something for me, Dino, with you that I wanted to ask about, which is YouTube Shorts.
Oh
So I
yeah.
want Tiger to have access to YouTube because he's into photography and editing and all these things, and he loves it. And there's some really great stuff on YouTube, right? There really is.
Absolutely.
There's some great educational stuff on YouTube for him. I want him to have access. But now I don't know how to turn off YouTube Shorts. I mean, I honestly, I haven't done any homework here either. I could just Google how to do this, but I don't think you can. I think the reason I haven't Googled is that I'm like, I don't think you can.
So
Have you heard this before? Like, how do you give
yeah.
access to the benefits of YouTube without the shit of YouTube Shorts?
So there's a Chrome extension that is massively helpful called Newsfeed Eradicator, and it works across all social media platforms. And it's really incredible. So on YouTube, what it does is it gets rid of all recommended videos, all shorts. When you're watching a video, that little side panel of like, here's what you should watch next, that goes away. So YouTube is literally a search bar, and then the videos that show up when you search. And it is actually insane how much that will transform your relationship with YouTube, because 70% of
Does it
YouTube,
work on the phone too?
no, it does not. So my advice is basically, I don't use YouTube on my phone. I only use it on my laptop, and I only use it with Newsfeed Eradicator. So I have a set of accounts that I'm subscribed to, and then I use search. And it's basically like you're flipping the power dynamic between you and YouTube, right? Because normally you open up the website, and the first thing that happens is YouTube queries all the data that they've collected about you, and they figure out what are the top things that we can show John to get him to spend as much time as possible. Now you're the one querying YouTube for the videos that you want to see, and that's all you see. So this is what I mean by it's the power of like redesigning your digital environment in such a way that it supports your intentions. Is that's really like the core, like most helpful part of Project Reboot. And it's stuff that you can do today. So yeah, I think Newsfeed Eradicator is a super, super helpful tool. And I would just advocate for not using YouTube on the phone. Because I mean,
So I think these are huge ideas. I have to be careful because I'm going to go like a storm into the. I'm going to be like, Tiger, give me your computer. Like, you know, no YouTube. I want to take YouTube off his phone. That's it's so interesting because it's not even just a conversation about YouTube or YouTube Shorts. It's like which device, because if you could have YouTube on your computer, but I don't want you to have it on your phone.
Yeah.
That's a game changer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think
Things I haven't considered, man, and I'm so excited for this conversation. If you can't tell,
yeah, it's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I think circling back to the point I was making earlier about, people that are addicted, not really showing it and seeming unaware, and parents feeling this responsibility to raise their awareness to how much time they're spending on their phone and the consequences. I think the biggest like shift that parents need to make is often this is like a me versus you thing, right? It's like I I need you to like get the YouTube app off your phone because you're wasting time on it, or it's bad for your attention, or you're looking at too many shorts, whatever. Um, Instead, it should be a us versus big tech. It should be, hey Tiger, I don't know about you, but I'm getting sucked down YouTube Shorts, and it upsets me because I know there's a lot of good stuff on YouTube that I want to watch, but the app is set up in such a way that it's trying to get me to just look at as many ads as I can. And it's frustrating because I feel like I'm spending too much time on YouTube and I'm not getting everything out of it that I could be. But I found this thing called Newsfeed Eradicator, and it makes it so that like I am only watching the videos I want to on YouTube. Isn't that awesome? I think we should both set it up, right? Like repositioning as I struggle with this too. It's not your fault, and like
Totally.
I'm on your team, and it's really it is us versus big tech. Like the whole
Yeah.
business model that big tech is built on, like it's got incentives that are fundamentally misaligned with the well-being of the users, both you and your kid. So like making that clear to them and really just like switching that perspective, I think is like the biggest parenting change that I would recommend in terms of how you approach this, you know.
Mm. Yeah. And, I can kind of see that that's a strategy that works no matter how old they are, right?
Yeah,
It's
for
like
sure.
you can be talking with a college student about sharing in your truth, your vulnerability around your addictions to something.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. What else, man? Oh, by the way, I wanted to ask you, I wrote a note here about The Social Dilemma.
Yeah,
What
yeah.
did you think of that film? I know it's been out for a while, but I don't know of any other films. Maybe you could also point us to, are there any other more recent documentaries, whatever, but opinion on that one and others?
I think The Social Dilemma is the best one. I haven't seen anything more recent. I think it does a really good job of kind of eloquently describing the problem. And yeah, it definitely really reinforced what I'm trying to do because I had just had the idea for Project Reboot when I saw The Social Dilemma, and it was a super validating thing for me that this is such a massive problem. And
Yeah.
I think the Center for Humane Technology and Tristan Harris, they're the ones that made that film. They've just done so much awesome work. So Your Undivided Attention is their podcast, and they've got a bunch of really, really
Mm.
interesting episodes that dive deeper into these issues and the potential solutions. Um, it's more on like a top down perspective. So design changes that social media can make, policies that governments could
Mm.
implement. Whereas I'm tackling this from a more bottom up perspective of like, here's what you can do as a user, as a parent, as a student. But I think it's helpful to have both perspectives. So Your Undivided Attention is an awesome, awesome resource.
How is your message received, Dino? How is it received by the students? How is it received by the parents? What kind of feedback are you getting?
I think it's been received really well. I wasn't sure what to expect because teaching that course at Berkeley, it's a very controlled environment with a lot of filters in place, right? For one, they're Berkeley students. They're generally pretty like dedicated, academically driven, all that stuff. Two, and this is the big one, they signed up for the course on their own volition, right? Like they applied. So they know that this is a problem and they want to fix it. So when I started working with high schools, I was like, man, like both those filters are getting removed. Like, I don't know how this is going to be received. But I've been really pleasantly surprised by how receptive kids are. And I think it is because like they recognize this is a problem. Like they know it's so new that we haven't really figured out the right way to talk about it. And often they feel a little bit attacked by the whole thing. And they feel like
Yeah, yeah.
the people that are talking to them about it don't really fully understand because they didn't grow up with social media. And there are a lot of
Yeah.
like, it's so baked into their social lives at this point, you know, like getting off of Instagram, getting off of Snapchat. It's not that simple. You'll get excluded from a lot of stuff if that's what all of your friends are using to communicate. So I think they've got a very love-hate relationship with it. And I
Dude, that's really important. I think what you just said so important for
yeah,
parents to hear.
yeah,
Because you just textured it with a little bit like, hey, the real challenge, because you could get frustrated as a parent that every time you see them on their phone, you're like, you're wasting your life. You could get real preachy about it,
yep,
right?
yep,
And you can then take your frustration because they're not doing their chore that you want them to do, but maybe you haven't clearly communicated or you're not a great leader as a parent. That's possible. And by the way, raising my hand,
yeah.
that's me, at times. I'm also, I think, really great at times, but I have a lot of weaknesses as a parent, clearly. But I take it out on Tiger sometimes because I'm so frustrated and I don't know the solution and it just comes out as anger. But really that's
Yeah.
fear. Like I'm afraid that if he doesn't figure this shit out, he's going to be in trouble.
Yep.
So it's fear, and then it comes out as anger. But what you just said about like if they get off it entirely, they might be excluded
Yep.
from all these things. There, people are talking about, did you see this? Did you see that? And you just feel like an outsider. You're like, nope, didn't see any of that. I'm missing out on life.
Yeah.
It's really important.
Yeah, it is. And I think a change that I would recommend from a parenting perspective is just like be curious and recognize that in the same way that like you want to raise your kids' awareness to the potential like benefits and negatives, they can probably raise your awareness to some of the positives. And I think when you paint with a broad brush and you make generalizations about like this isn't worth your time, you're spending I don't get why you can't get off this thing, like what's the big deal? Like you lose a little bit of credibility in their eyes, right? Because there are important parts of it to them. Like, and there are good aspects of social media. It's not a black and white thing at all. So asking them, like, what role does Instagram and Snapchat play in your social life? Who are your favorite creators to watch and why? Like, can you show me some of your favorite TikToks? Like, being open minded and curious, I think it reinforces what I'm talking about of like, you want to put yourself on their team, right? That's really the biggest thing. So I think, yeah, just being genuinely curious about it and not like passing judgment is huge. I always say you don't want to be a judge that imposes rules on them. You want to be a guide that helps them figure out their own intentions for using it and then holds them accountable to that ideal.
Yeah. Do you have an opinion, Dino, based on all the data, the research, your focus in this area of like, look, parents, just don't even get them a phone before this age. Like, don't even begin the social media game until this age. And if you do this one first, or something like that.
For sure. Yeah. So I think that there's a lot of momentum for waiting until eighth grade. Potentially even high school to get onto social media. This is still an open question for me, and I'm still kind of looking into it. I think there's a lot of nuance in terms of it's really a function of like when all their friends are on it too. So if I could control everything, I would have all kids probably get introduced to social media in high school, and I would make sure that like there should be an onboarding curriculum into social media. They need to go in.
Yes.
Because as I'm saying,
dude, yes.
Like right now when people start out, they're intentional, but they're unaware. And the objective with Project Reboot is to make people aware and intentional. And we would skip a lot of like negative steps if we just raise their awareness to the costs, to the negatives, and to the benefits before they even got on it. So that's what I've been talking to actually a couple Waldorf schools about doing is having like end of eighth grade, Project Reboot as kind of an onboarding into social media in terms of which apps to let them get on first. I think Snapchat, like, I don't know, it's such a double-edged sword. It's so frustrating because TikTok figured out that algorithmically ranked short form videos are the best way to capture people's attention. And they started winning the attention economy because of that. And so now all social media platforms have basically implemented the same exact thing. Now Snapchat has TikToks on it, same with Instagram, same with Facebook, YouTube Shorts, Netflix is adding it. Like it's everywhere at this point.
Amazon.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Like the cat is out of the bag, So I really like the core recommendation of Project Reboot is use social media as it was initially intended to be used, right? Like all social media platforms have followed this pattern of they had a really clearly defined core purpose when they first came out. Facebook was great when it first launched. Same with Instagram. It was like a digital scrapbook for, sharing memories with friends and seeing what they're up to. And now it's a bite-sized Netflix. It's an entertainment service because they've had to succumb to, whatever gathers people's attention, and that's these short form algorithmically ranked videos. So I think getting kids to use social media in a social way and not just as like an entertainment service is the biggest thing. But the problem is that's on every platform now. So it's hard to run away from.
Most things that this is education. So many things. It's like, it's just educate your kids. This is crazy, Dino. I was in Switzerland with my family. This is a couple weeks ago. And we're hiking up into the mountains. We're at this beautiful lake, kind of like midway up into the Alps. There's a playground. There's rowboats. I'm just setting the scene here,
That's
right?
awesome.
There's families, there's children, there's a playground that has open fire pits. People are literally grilling out with open fire, like in the playground area. And when you look over, that the fires are being the fire fuel is real firewood, and there is a hatchet next to the firewood, a hatchet. There's 3-year-olds running around. There's all right. And I'm like, holy shit. By the way, this was all through Europe. There was just like so many places where we were at a water park and there were no lifeguards. And it was just fascinating, like the level of trust. And I was like, you know, what's interesting is I watched this grandmother walk up with her young son to the hatchet, and she was showing him how to use it. And the reason this worked is because there were parents everywhere.
Yeah.
It wasn't like the parents just dropped the kids at the playground and split. They were like, the parents were there. They were involved. They were part of it. And it's like, yeah, there's a dangerous thing. Let me show you how to use it.
Yep.
Versus, you know, and this goes all the way back to my youngest being at a school where I showed up to pick him up at school one day, and he's like 3 years old and he's got a real hammer in his hands, hammering a nail, you know, and it's like, in some schools, they'd be like, no way he could, you know, hit his finger or something. But if you teach them how to use, and I know there's limits to all this. I get it. Somebody could send me a message and be like, that's crazy, John. Here's the reasons why. But look, the point that I'm making is the phone is a dangerous thing if you're not taught how to use it. Yeah. Social media, like you said, there should be an onboarding. Like, I'm just saying, this is an opportunity for parents to be teachers, to be involved, not bulldozers, but educators, guides, you know, partners in this. That's what I'm saying.
For sure. Yeah, I think there's another like angle that you want to approach this from too, which, as you said, there are so many beneficial aspects of technology. You want your kids to use Duolingo and all that stuff. Like, I don't think that just because I would wait until 8th grade or 9th grade to start to get them onto social media, potentially even later than that, I don't think that does not mean don't let them use technology. Like, the Gab phone is kind of like a light version of a smartphone that doesn't have access to social media and it's for kids. I think getting them introduced to that earlier is
GAB.
GABB.
GABB.
Yeah. So I think that's a nice like intermediary step. But generally, like, I always say to parents, you should be planting more than you prune, right? Like, your kids are going to use technology. There's no getting around it. They should use technology. It's like vital to succeeding in the world today. And you're not in a position to control whether or not they're going to get on it. They're going to get on it. It's a question of how are they going to use it. And you've got like two different approaches you can take. You can prune, which means restrict the negative aspects of it and make it so they can't, you know, use any social media or constantly monitor everything that they're looking at the internet to make sure that you're filtering out all the bad stuff. Or you can plant and actually instill a desire in them to leverage the positive aspects of the internet. And I think that focusing more on the planting aspect is a lot more beneficial in the long run, right? Like, there's so many amazing learning resources online. And I think exploring those with your kid is one of the most valuable things that you can do. Take a masterclass with him. There's like 100 plus masterclasses on magic, on wilderness survival, on cooking, on baking. Like, there's all sorts of stuff that's going to pique their interest, and it's going to spark them to become lifelong learners that leverage the internet for its positive aspects. And that is inherently going to limit the amount of negative time that they're spending on the internet, because they're not going to be as drawn to this, like, you know, short form 15-second, you know, videos of people dancing. They're going to be like, oh, I could learn how to, you know, become incredible at drawing, or, you know, there's so many other more fulfilling aspects of it to use. You just need to show them, right? Getting into content creation. Like, if there's something they're really passionate about. Like start a YouTube channel about it, make a personal website. Like I don't know. I think there's a lot that you can do to guide them towards a relationship with it that is proportionally like more focused on the beneficial aspects of the internet. And I think that's going to help them a lot in the long term.
Yeah. I want to take two big leaps here. I want to end with, so make sure that we don't forget this, but I would love to end by talking about how do people bring you into their school? So if there's a parent listening and they're like, I got to get my school to get Dino to do this assembly, how do they do that? Let's come back to that in just a second. But one last question is, when we think about the dangers of this, when we think about the future of society, when we think in that term, right? And I'm zooming way out here, thinking big into the future. I remember hearing something, I don't know how true it is, I think it's probably true, that China developed TikTok, and if you look at their algorithm, and what their kids are doing, first of all, they limit how much they can do it. And when they see videos, they're seeing that, people become engineers and astronauts, and it's productive things. And the algorithm in the US is basically dumbing you down, entertaining you into an oblivion. So is that true? What do you know about that? Because there is this like psyop type of, concept that is floating out there, and I'm wondering what your opinion is on that.
Yes, I do. As far as I know, that is true. They at least within the last year, that was the case. The Center for Humane Technology talks about that on multiple podcasts. Basically, in China, not only is the content that you see on their version of TikTok totally different, it's basically Chinese patriotism content and educational material exclusively until you're 14. And then I think it changes a little bit. They have time restrictions on it. So you can't be on it for more than, I think it's like an hour or an hour and a half a day. You can't use it after 10 p.m. or before 6 a.m. They also have those restrictions on video games and stuff. So yeah, they're basically, China recognizes that one of the greatest risks that its population faces is having an unhealthy relationship with technology, and they are just doing everything in their power to make sure that doesn't happen. And meanwhile, they're shipping out, whereas their population's getting the fruits and vegetables, the rest of the world is getting the junk food of TikTok, right? And I really do believe like your content diet, what you're consuming on a daily basis, that is almost as important as your nutritional diet. It's going to affect what skills you have. It's going to affect your worldview, your perception of others, your perception of yourself, and your attention span, right? Like it's a super important thing to pay attention to that I don't think people think about quite enough. So yeah, I do believe that, I mean, it makes total sense from their perspective to do that. But that said, like, it's not just TikTok, right? There's Instagram, there's Snapchat, there's YouTube Shorts. Like the cat, as I'm saying, is out of the bag, and all of these social media platforms are incentivized to maximize for engagement, and that is inherently going to result in them just entertaining us to death unless we do something about it. So yeah, it's freaky, but again, like I'm optimistic because I think there are a lot of things that you can do to override the default settings on social media on your phone. And I think that education does go a long way to help people just be more intentional.
Yeah. And I think it is important, at least in my family, that from the get-go, I had boundaries for Tiger with his phone. Like it does turn off at 9 o'clock. It
Awesome.
does not turn on before 7. I love the idea of not sleeping with the devices in the rooms. I love reminding my kids, by the way, that they're not their devices. They're my devices. I let them use.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't ever take away their device. I
that.
ask for my device back, which I think is also important, that there's not this ownership of like, you're taking away my thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is a tool I'm letting you use, just like you can use the circular saw in the garage if you ask me, and I train you how to do it. Same thing.
Yeah.
One you could lose a hand, the other one you could lose your mind.
Yeah.
But either way, I'm going to be training you. I love this plant more than you prune. Where is that yours?
Yeah.
Where does that come from?
Yeah. I don't know. It just felt right.
Dude, that's
Yeah,
beautiful.
thank you.
I'm going to totally use that, and I'll give you credit when I do.
Awesome.
I love it. Love it, Dino. Hey, man, I know we've got you in the membership community. And as I say that, guys, I just want you to know we're at now 335 members of the Front Row Dad community. And that is a group of men who are the most committed guys who are putting their money, onto what they value, which is family. They're saying, like, look, a lot of guys pay for business coaching, and they'll pay lots of money for business coaching. But when it comes to family coaching, some guys are like, well, I wouldn't pay for that. And you're like, why not? Why would you not want to get help? Why would you not want to be in community with other like-minded men? So 335 guys pay to be a member of our community, and they show up for calls throughout the month. They come to in-person events that we host throughout the year so they can sharpen the axe, so that they can take a moment, get some new ideas, share their victories with other people, share their losses with people, be supported, but ultimately to grow. And the rising tide for sure lifts all ships in our community. I say all that in case anybody wants to join. Go to Front Row Dads, because Dino is going to be with the Front Row Dads for a call where guys can just on a live video feed chime in and ask Dino questions. That's the type of stuff we do in the community. We bring in experts. We bring in people who are passionate about the subject matters that the guys care about. Even in a couple weeks as I record this, we've got my buddy Dan Martell, who's a business coach, coming in, and he's going to be doing business coaching for everybody. So we've got a lot of good stuff, and Dino is just one of the rock stars that we have. So Dino, for anybody out there listening who's like, got to get this guy to my kid's school, where do they go? What do they do? Who do they talk to? How do they recommend you? What happens?
Yeah, so my website is projectreboot.school. And on there, there's a page that details my school services. And what I would do is just send that link to any contact that you have in your school. Preferably it's somebody in the administration. It could be a counselor. It could be the principal or head of school or the dean of students. But just, yeah, get the word out to them. And I give assemblies. I run these programs in schools, and I do parent presentations as well. So calendar's starting to book out for the upcoming semester, so best to try to get in touch sooner than later, while there's still some availability. But it would be awesome if you could just reach out to whatever contact you have in your school, PTA head, anything like that, and we can try to set something up.
And junior highs and high schools are your sweet spot right now?
That's correct.
Yeah, cool. That's great. And does it matter, private, public, anybody?
Anybody.
I love it. Say the website one more time in case anybody missed it.
It's projectreboot.school.
All right, fellas, thanks for listening today. And Dino, thanks for being with me today, man. I really enjoyed this conversation. I can't wait to bring you into the community and have you meet all the guys. We got an epic crew. And for anybody out there listening, I'm calling you up, Dad, if you want to grow as a father. FrontRowDads.com. We've got an epic group of men who want to be family men with businesses, not businessmen with families. Dino, have a great day, man, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, John. You too. Thanks for having me on.